All right, so in the last video, we already saw how to implement the push segue. Next, I want to show you the modal segue. And the modal segue is going to be used to add a new context to a new contact to our list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag in a new view controller right here. And next, I'm going to drag in a bar button item, which are the kind of buttons that we can place on the navigation bar. So I'm going to move it right here. And I don't actually have to customize it or anything. I just can use one of the system items to get the same nice plus that we also see in the Contacts app. All right, so from the plus, I now want to navigate with a modal view to the new view controller that I created. So rather than selecting show this time, I'm actually going to select present modally, because that's how we set up a modal segue. And we can already run the app again, and we'll see that this new view controller now is going to slide in from the bottom. At the same time, we'll have a problem, because now that we don't use a navigation controller anymore and we manage a stack of view controllers, we don't have a back button. So even though we are going to display the new view controller with a modal segue in just a second, we won't be able to navigate back to the previous view controller, which is the table view controller. We'll actually have to add a custom button to the next view controller. And right now we're actually crashing because we still implement prepare for segue here. And for any segue that is executed, we try to cast the destination view controller to a contact detail view controller. So this time we actually need to make sure that we're only executing this for the right segue. So let's go ahead and add an identifier to the segue to prevent this in the future. Show contact detail segue is gonna be what I name this segue. And so now inside the context table view controller, we can update the prepare for segue method to only execute the code with the contact detail view controller if we're actually executing the right segue. All right, so let's run the app again and convince ourselves that what I said before is true, that we'll see a new view controller sliding in from the bottom when we hit the plus button, but at the same time we won't be able to navigate back because we don't have a back button anymore. All right. So again, okay, so this time it crashes because I'm force unwrapping the identifier and we haven't set an identifier on the modal segue. So let's do that real quick as well. Add contact segue. That's what I'm going to call this one. And finally, let's run the app one more time to actually see that what I said before is true. I click on the plus button and we see the empty view controller sliding in from the bottom, but at the same time we can't navigate back, so we are stuck in this new view controller until we go ahead and set up a way to navigate back. And let's do that right away. So this time I'm actually just going to use a regular UI button, and this button I'm going to call cancel, and then I'm going to create a second button up here which is going to get the name save. And then I also want to add a text field that will allow me to add a new contact right there. Placeholder, enter name for new contact. All right, so we've got set up. We have set up this this view. In fact, I'm also going to create some auto layout constraints to make sure that when I'm running the app on the simulator, everything is gonna work out just fine. Leading and trailing alignment here. update it. We need to set a vertical spacing here as well. So now we should be good. Let's update all the frames. And now we've got this new user interface. And let's actually now create the code file for this. So again, this is going to be a subclass of UI view controller. I'm going to call it add contact view controller. And remove all the boilerplate in here. Go into the storyboard again, set the class so that I can configure it through the assistant editor. So go up here to the identity inspector of this view controller and now use the assistant editor to go ahead and configure the view controller and its user interface. All right. So here we go. We've got the text field. Let me create the IB outlet for this first text field. Actually, I'm going to call it name text field. And then I'm going to create IB actions for the save button. Save button tapped. And I'm also going to create an IB action for the cancel button. And that's going to be very similar. Cancel button tapped. Not forgetting to change this to an action. Re-indent everything, and there we've got the basic setup now. We can actually go into the code right now and implement everything right there. Oh, sorry for the confusion here, the different panes. All right, first let's implement the simple functionality for navigating back. And you could go and set up an unwind segue in this case, but this is actually somewhat more complicated, so I'm going to go with a simpler approach to just call the presenting view controller, which is actually in this case the context table view controller, and I'm going to call dismiss on this view controller, and that's all I need for the view to, or for the view controller to disappear when I click on the button. I add the same line here on the save button as well, because for now we just want to be sure that we can go back from the add contact view controller to the table view controller. Running the app is going to bring us to this view controller that I just configured in storyboards. And if I click save here or cancel, it doesn't matter. We're just going to dismiss the view controller and go back to the previous one. All right, the last thing that we need to do is we need to pass information to the previous view controller. And in this case, I'm going to do it with a delegate protocol. Or actually, no, I'm going to do it with a closure because it's a little bit faster. So here, I'm just declaring a closure. I'm going to call it add contact. And it's of type string to nothing. And the whole thing is going to be optional. And when we tap the save button, I'm just going to call the closure with the content of the text fields. So this will retrieve the text from the text field, which is the name of the new person, and will call the closure that I declared up here, and that can be defined by the client of this class or the user of this class. Whoever wants to present the add contact view controller can go ahead and define this closure. And in our case, this is going to be the context table view controller, and it will add the string to the context array. Actually, let's make this just a question mark. It's a little bit safer. And here, let me also go ahead and make sure that we are executing this in the right case. So add context segue was what I called it in the storyboard, I believe. And we're going to take a very similar approach as before. So we get the destination view controller, except that this time it's not going to be the contact detail view controller, but rather the add contact view controller. And similarly, we need to cast this to the right view controller type. And now we're going to add the closure right here. Add contact is what we're going to Define add contact. Is this the closure right here? Why is it not being displayed? Let's just go ahead and implement it. Name in. Names append name. And because we don't want to create a retain cycle here, we're just going to make sure that self is captured weak. Actually, it's going to be unowned. We can use an implicit optional here. And it's called contacts, not names. And of course, we have to make it a variable and not a constant if we want to change the contents of the array. All right. Next, what we also need to do is we need to update the table view. And a neat way to do this is by implementing the did set observer of the context. So inside here, we can just go say table view reload data. So anytime the contents of this array change, we automatically update the table view. Let's go ahead and run this application. If I now go ahead and add a new name to this, hit save, we see that the new name appears in the table view.